Here with me there is Ivar Grimstad from the Eclipse Foundation that will explore the importance of the open source in our daily work. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So my name is Ivar Grimstad. I'm the Jakarta developer advocate at Eclipse Foundation. And today I'll talk about the journey of contribution and collaboration in open source. So I'm a Java champion. I'm an Oracle Ace Pro. I work for the Eclipse Foundation. I'm an Apache NetBeans committer. I run a Java user group in Malmö, and I'm involved in the Java Community Process Executive Committee. So I'm involved in most of the Java stuff that is happening around us. And my social media coordinates, you can look at them there. As I said, I come from Eclipse Foundation, and Eclipse Foundation, we have around 400 and some projects, a lot of code, a lot of stuff, a lot going on there. Jakarta is one of the projects, Adoptium is another. So we have lots of stuff going on. But today I'll just talk about open source in general. And how many here are consuming open source? Like using some product, yeah? It's everybody, yeah. So, and how many are contributing? Yeah, because this is an open source conference, obviously, there's a lot of people. But usually, this contributors is much less than the consumers, and this is what we see in the industry. We're consuming a lot of open source, we're using it, but we're not contributing back. So why is this, and how can we fix it? And I'll just go through a couple of open source principles. First, so we're all on the same page, and you all know this, but it's all about transparency. You know, it's access to the information media, it's on public mailing lists, we do things in the open, we don't do the secret rooms in the basement smoking cigars. It's all in the open. It's all about collaboration and enhancing each other's work. So the sum of what we're doing is better than each of them on alone. It's free to experiment. So we learn by trying. We release often, release maybe buggy stuff, but we do it and we fix it and we do it often. We're very inclusive and it's a meritocracy. So ideas can come from everywhere, but the best idea should win no matter where it comes from. And it's all about the community. As the previous speaker was talking about, we unite around a common purpose. So we share the values and community conquers over individual goals. Open source is also about licenses. And luckily we have the open source initiative where you can find the information about all the licenses and figure out which one or what fits your need. And the important thing is to be aware of the difference between the open source and the source available. Because just because you can see the code doesn't mean that you can use it. So copying things out of Stack Overflow is not necessarily open source, it's not necessarily legal, it can be illegal to use it. So be careful there and know how to distinguish between the source available and the open source licenses. And that's also about the consuming responsibly. So I'll mix in a little bit about contributing and consuming, but let's look at some different types of open source projects. So you have these four kinds are what we usually talk about. You have the solo developer that does something cool on GitHub. You have the single vendor that does something and puts it on the open. You have some community stuff, and you have the open source foundations like Eclipse Foundation or Apache Foundation. Let's look at some characteristics of these. So the solo developer is usually one or two guys or girls that have something in common that they do on GitHub. It can be either extremely hard or easy to get involved. It depends on how these people are open to new ideas and stuff. And support is usually never there. Some examples here are ByteBuddy. That's a very good project. That is maintained by a small group of people. And you have Snoopy, which is also a good project, but is maintained by me and is not very active. So there can be anything. Anybody remember these? Or anybody doing JavaScript? So these are Faker.js and Caller.js, and these were used everywhere in JavaScript UIs, and the maintainer there put in some evil code. And through the NPM and this kind of JavaScript stuff, they get stuff from everybody got it, and everybody got a bug. So this can be kind of the danger about using these solo developer open source projects. Then you have the single vendor kind, where it's a company open source things. And these are usually very difficult to get contributions in, because you probably have to be an employee of that company. But you can get very good support from it, because that's sort of the business of that company. So it's safe to use, and Spring is one example of this. Gradle and other have good companies backing this from behind. But there are also some bad players out there, or not necessarily bad players, but remember Akka, they changed their license from Apache to a source available license. So if you're using Akka in your business applications, suddenly you would have to pay to use it. And it was free, and now it's not. And they just changed the license because it's a single vendor, they have all control over it, they can do it. And that's fine. I mean, it's up to them, but that's a risk you take by using these products. But then you have the community kind of projects, where you can have a good community around it. It's generally very welcoming, but there are necessarily no formal processes around it. And there is a social hierarchy that you kind of have to fit into. And there are some examples like Postgre, OpenJDK, Mockito, and etc. All good projects out there. PowerMock, anybody use PowerMock? So yeah, PowerMock is a mocking framework for Java that was very popular for a while. And it's a good thing, but it's just stopped developing. So this is something that can also happen to the community-driven open source projects as well. If it doesn't have any business behind it, it can just stop doing it when those developers leave. Then you have the foundation-driven projects that are more formal organizations, that have a formal development process. It's a meritocracy, like most open source projects. There can be companies sponsoring and funding them. So examples of these are, for example, and support by these companies are usually done by the commercial actors contributing to the projects. You have Jetty, Maven, Kubernetes, all kinds. These are examples of these kind of projects. But of course, bad things can happen to foundation-driven projects as well. So you probably remember Log4Shell. And so things can happen. But so you're never safe for anything. And that brings us a little bit into security. And if you look at security, you probably also remember SolarWinds that were attacking your build chain. So open source foundation have these kind of organizations and infrastructure around it to cope with these build chains things, as well as just the code. So in addition to having a platform for collaboration and a governance platform, and a collaboration platform, you also have these services that takes care of things like your supply chain security. And this is something that most open source foundation, and Eclipse Foundation in particular, serve to the community on those projects. And there are evolving expectations out there around open source. And you can just look at people asking, can I use this license? Where is your SBOM? How do you handle CVs? And these kind of questions are popping up more and more often. And we get things like regulations playing in. And you probably have a couple of sessions here about the CRA. That's one of them. The PLD is another one. All of these are kind of things that are affecting us as open source developers. And foundations out there, you have the American variants of this as well, the presidential stuff, and where they ask the industry, regulate, or we will come after you and regulate it for you. So you have all these kind of government and institutions going in and regulating what we're going to do. And maybe there is room for some public policy stuff in the open source foundations as well. So foundations are there to kind of help with these kind of things. And one of the initiatives from the Eclipse Foundation is to start this open regulatory compliance working group, where a lot of open source foundations, most of them are members, and they are going to collaborate on how to handle these regulations coming from governments pushed upon us and shield the developers from it. So we as open source developers aren't necessarily going to have to cope with this because the foundations take care of it for us. So contribute responsibly as well. So what's the first rule of contributing to open source? So don't worry if you don't know this, because this is my rule. It's just do contribute. And actually, this morning I was in the hotel gym, and they had this thing on the wall saying, to start is the most important thing. It's Plato. So it's Plato and me, we say this. So how to get started? Well, you have to convince your boss often, because you have to do maybe use some company time for this. And how do you convince your boss? Well, point to this one. We're consuming all these open source products where we're not contributing back. But that's probably not going to make it for them. Another thing is, you can say, we need to improve the software we rely on. We are using Log4j. We need to help Log4j get better so we can use it in the future. So improve the software we rely on. That can convince your boss. But why should you contribute yourself? How should you convince yourself? So, well, first of all, you can improve your skills. Because the open source project, if you look at those code bases, there are a lot of clever developers in there. And most of these, you can look at the code written by maybe some of the best developers in the world and be a part of it and learn from how these solve problems. So improve your skills. Build your reputation and career. Like, I used to be a consultant, and now I have a career in open source. I'm here on this stage speaking about open source. And I'm one example, but you can put on your resume that I contributed to this fantastic open source project that every company in the industry are using. Think about being a contributor to Apache Maven. You know, everybody uses Maven. And that brings us into what should you contribute? Well, it doesn't need to be code. It can be other things. It can be graphics. It can be UI. It can be just talking about it, being on stage at a conference, talk about an open source project. But the most important thing is to follow your passion, because it's much easier to set aside time to do things if you're passionate about it. And that brings us over to where to contribute. It's sort of where you're living. Do your stuff where you are working with it, where you're passionate about it. And I'll show my journey in open source. It's been moving around in all of these solo and foundation projects. I've been all over the place. You don't have to choose only foundations or only solo. You can go wander around as you want. And there are usually a kind of a ladder you have to go to kind of earn this meritocracy. Maybe you start as a user. That's a good place to start. You use an open source project. And then maybe you do some contribution, file a bug, or comment on an issue or something. And then after a while, maybe you're a regular contributor, so they recognize you. And you earn the right, and you can become a committer or a lead committer or a mentor for a project. So it's kind of you don't dive in and do, hey, I want to fix this bug in Java. The first commit you do, you probably start somewhere else. And when you choose things, you can go to a random GitHub repository and just send a pull request to a solo open source project, or you can go check out the company you're working for, contribute to their open source offering, or look at the projects the foundations are offering and see if there's anything there you can help with. So how to contribute? Most open source projects have some guides where you can find some way of getting involved. So this is the Getting Started guide at Jakarta EE. So if you want to get started with Jakarta EE, this is the Getting Started guide. You'll have some videos and see how you contribute and that kind of stuff. You can also show your support if you're not contributing anything. Just put a sticker on your laptop. When we hand out these stickers, it's just not only for fun. It's because we want to have our brand out there. So put the sticker on the laptop, and you're actually contributing to open source. So contribute responsibly. Think about these things coming over us, these regulatory things, and foundations are probably a safer way of doing it. You can do all kinds of open source projects. Just know where you are. Foundations are a good place to start. And remember, the first rule of contributing to open source is do it. With that, I thank you very much for listening. These are some resources you can look at afterwards, and we have 26 seconds for questions.
Any quick question from the public? If not, maybe I wish to ask what is the most rewarding aspect for you of contributing?
So what is the most rewarding aspects of contributing? That is to see your name at some open source project that everybody is using out there.